Welcome back to A Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. The Senate was not able to come to an agreement prior to their holiday recess, so the Affordable Care Act subsidies have effectively not been extended prior to their expiration date on the 1st of January. While this is incredibly disappointing, it's also incredibly unsurprising. When Senate Democrats agreed to end the government shutdown last month with a promise of a vote to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies, this is exactly what everyone was saying was going to happen. Democrats in the Senate had spent those 43 days of government shutdown championing the issue of keeping health care affordable by not letting those Affordable Care Act subsidies expire and causing 24 million Americans' health care premiums to double or triple once they did expire on the 1st of January. It was like the one central issue of the shutdown and why they kept it going as long as they did. So it felt like a complete failure on the part of the Democrats to allow the shutdown to end without an agreement to keep them going. People were saying that without that, the Affordable Care Act subsidies were as good as dead, because just agreeing to a vote was meaningless because all Republicans would do would vote against it and allow them to be killed. And now, 1 month later, that's exactly what happened. 43 days of government shutdown, standing firm on the importance of keeping these subsidies going because Americans would not be able to afford health care once their premiums doubled and tripled if those subsidies expired, and now that's exactly what they're going to do. And Democrats effectively got nothing out of that shutdown. Billionaires got to keep their tax breaks, and millions of Americans got to lose affordable health care. It's hard not to be massively frustrated at this outcome, even if it was completely expected. Senate Republicans were never going to vote to extend them. That was part of why the shutdown dragged on as long as it did, because every time Democrats would put up a bill to extend them and end the shutdown, Republicans would say no. Why would anything change once the government shutdown was over and they had even less reason to agree to it? Allowing the shutdown to end on an agreement to vote on it was essentially saying, instead of telling me you're going to let them expire today, I'll give you a month and let you tell me no, you're going to let them expire then. Republicans were never going to let those Affordable Care Act subsidies continue, and Democrats had to have known that. They knew what was at risk. How people's $185 monthly payments were about to jump up to $732. The Affordable Care Act nearly cut in half the rate of uninsured Americans, but that rate is about to go up significantly once the first rolls around and people simply cannot afford to pay for health insurance anymore. And those Republicans who had no intention of letting those subsidies continue have absolutely no plan on what those millions of Americans are supposed to do without affordable health care. All people in this country deserve access to affordable health care, regardless of financial status. I don't know how they expect this country to be great without it. There is no reason anyone should be paying over $8,500 a year just for health care. That's $8,000 just for the insurance deductibles. That's not even paying for all the stuff that the insurance chooses not to cover. And when presented with its realities, Republicans basically say that doesn't sound like our problem. But the reality is that it could not be clearer. Affordable health care makes people's lives better. There are people healthy and alive today who would not be if not for the Affordable Care Act subsidies allowing them to seek preventative medical care. It made it so people with limited incomes were able to spend that limited income on things that weren't just medical expenses. I would say I don't know where Republicans expect those people to pull out an extra $500 a month to pay for their health care needs. But the answer is that they don't care how or even if people can afford health care. It does not matter to them. All they do care about is that the Affordable Care Act has Obama's name on it, and therefore it must be eliminated. Letting these subsidies expire, knowing that it will cause millions of Americans to simply no longer be able to afford any sort of health insurance, it's just cruel. But cruelty is a part of the Republican playbook, so in that way it's entirely on brand for them. The only real silver lining here is just how badly this is going to play for Republicans going forward. They do not really have a solid alternative to these expiring subsidies, so the people depending on them will simply lose out on their health care entirely. The Republicans are the reason why. Democrats wanted to keep them having insurance. Republicans didn't. In some ways, it's just as simple as that. Those low-income Republican voters have essentially been abandoned by their own party. And while that may not be enough to push them to vote Democrat in the next election, it's certainly not going to motivate them to vote back in the same people who denied them their health care the next time they're on the ballot. A lot of voters are just losing faith in the Republican Party as a whole, and this is only one more of Republican-led governance. I think it's pretty safe to say next year's midterm elections are going to be a very bad time for Republicans. Having Republican indifference to the needs of millions of low-income Americans put on full display has really invigorated people, and it's not something they're going to easily forget, especially when they're in the voting booth. Republicans could not make it more obvious that they are a party of rich people for rich people, full stop. Americans deserve stronger leadership from both sides of the political aisle. They shouldn't be stuck with a Republican Party that is exclusively catering to the interests and needs of billionaires, and the Democrats should be a party which are stronger and able to actually push back against them to make sustainable, noticeable change that helps all Americans. Americans' health care premiums are about to shoot up because we don't have that. Congressional Republicans are basically able to force Democrats into ending the shutdown and getting nothing in return for it because they knew that in the end Democratic leadership would do what they always do and cave when the pressure got too much, which is exactly what happened. It made Democratic leadership look weak, but it did also show the Republicans just did not care about Americans' health care and had no issue leaving them out to dry if it meant giving tax breaks to the ultra-wealthy. Even though Democrats ultimately failed in their mission to get the Affordable Care Act subsidies extended beyond the January 1st deadline, the resulting pain that millions of Americans are going to feel are going to be exclusively on the shoulders of Republicans. Democrats at least tried to help all Americans who depended on those Affordable Care Act subsidies to be able to afford their health care. It is a bit sad that their greatest achievement in this health care fight was trying and failing to do something, but at least they can say they tried something, which is better than Republicans, who only wanted to say no to anything Democrats wanted. Republicans clearly didn't want to help anyone except themselves and their rich benefactors. Low-income Republicans who are going to now lose their ability to afford their health care are going to have a hard time blaming Democrats for this when it is entirely Republicans' fault. Though admittedly, I say that, but I know that the Republicans will find some way to spin this to make it not be their fault and to somehow be Democrats' fault, probably blaming anyone except themselves for their own personal failures. It regularly mystifies me how the party of personal responsibility never fails to avoid taking responsibility when they have done something wrong. They always want to take all the credit and none of the blame. They're the party of hypocrisy at every turn. And while losing these Affordable Care Act subsidies is a serious blow, it is going to hurt a lot of Americans. One can only hope that they turn that pain into action. Remember who did this to them and why they did it, because their Republican elected officials failed them and should not simply be allowed to get away with it. And maybe in some part that was the Democrats' strategy. Yes, they let themselves basically lose the shutdown fight and allowed these subsidies to expire, still trying as much as they could to get them extended, but knowing their Republican colleagues would never allow them to be. But at least being able to say, we fought for you, we fought for your health care. While yes, we could have done more, at least we did something, unlike the Republicans who were perfectly willing to let you lose your health care and were willing to keep the government shut down as Americans starved without their SNAP benefits. There are a lot of legitimate criticisms of the Democratic leadership in Congress, but at the very least, they made an effort. They weren't saying we only want to help our people. They wanted to help all Americans, even if it was the people who didn't vote for them. They still wanted to make sure they were able to feed themselves and have health care, unlike the Republicans who apparently wanted neither of those things. And it's likely to cost Republicans dearly, not just in this upcoming midterm election, but going forward. People are unlikely to forget that when there was the chance to help them be able to afford their health care, Republicans said no. And they shouldn't forget, because that is the Republican legacy, a pure obstruction and absolutely no substance. So my heart absolutely goes out to those who are now no longer able to afford their health care after the 1st of January, thanks to Republicans. But if this pain is enough to wake up a lot of people and get them to see just how cruel and uncaring Republicans have always been, and getting them voted out of office en masse, it will have been worth it, I think. I wish that did not have to come at the cost of their well-being and health, but sadly it seems like there just was no avoiding it. Alright guys, that'll be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time when I cut you off another slice of news.